There are moments in life when a person turns to prayer because something inside them longs for change. They pray for clarity when their direction feels uncertain. They pray for breakthrough when obstacles seem impossible to move. They pray for opportunity, healing, restoration, or the opening of doors that could lead them toward a better future. In those moments, most people imagine how the answer might arrive. They picture a sudden solution appearing in front of them, a visible miracle that resolves the struggle quickly and clearly. They imagine circumstances aligning perfectly, opportunities appearing exactly where they hoped they would, and problems disappearing in ways that confirm their faith was rewarded. This expectation is natural because human beings often understand answers through immediate results. When a problem exists, the mind looks for a direct solution that removes the difficulty. But the deeper spiritual journey often unfolds in a way that looks very different from these expectations. For many people, the moment when God begins answering their prayer does not look like a breakthrough at first. Instead, it may look like disruption. A door they hoped would open suddenly closes. A relationship they believed was stable begins changing or even fading away. Plans that once felt certain begin falling apart in ways that feel confusing and painful. In those moments, the person who prayed begins questioning what happened. They may wonder whether their prayer was ignored. They may assume that the answer was no. Some even begin questioning their faith, wondering why the path became more complicated after they asked for help. What makes these moments difficult is that the answer is often hidden inside the change itself. Divine answers rarely focus only on immediate comfort. Instead, they often focus on the long-term direction of a person's life. When God responds to prayer, the answer may involve redirecting someone away from a path that looked promising, but would ultimately lead to struggle or limitation. It may involve removing circumstances that feel familiar, but no longer align with the purpose unfolding ahead. In this way, the answer to prayer may not appear as a gift placed directly into your hands. Instead, it may appear as a shift in your environment that slowly moves you towards something different. At first, this kind of response can feel confusing because it disrupts expectations. When people pray for clarity, they often expect immediate understanding. When they pray for opportunity, they expect doors to open. When they pray for blessing, they expect circumstances to improve quickly. But the wisdom of God often operates beyond the narrow view of the moment. While a person may only see the current problem, God sees the entire path that lies ahead. He sees the opportunities that will appear years later. He sees the lessons that must be learned before certain responsibilities can be handled. He sees which environments will strengthen a person's growth and which ones may slowly weaken it. Because of this broader perspective, the answer to prayer sometimes begins with redirection. Instead of moving you directly toward what you asked for, God may guide you away from something that would prevent you from reaching your true purpose. These moments often feel uncomfortable because they involve uncertainty. When the familiar structure of life begins changing, the mind searches for explanation. But many answers only become clear after time passes and the larger pattern begins revealing itself. What once looked like a closed door may later be recognized as protection. What once felt like delay may later reveal itself as preparation. What once seemed like loss may become the very event that redirected your life towards something greater than you originally imagined. Faith grows strongest during these moments because trust becomes necessary. Instead of believing only when the outcome looks positive, you begin learning how to trust the process even when the meaning is not immediately visible. You start recognizing that divine answers do not always arrive as obvious blessings. Sometimes they arrive as changes that quietly move your life in a new direction. This perspective does not remove the emotional difficulty of those moments, but it transforms how they are understood. Instead of assuming that prayer went unanswered, you begin considering the possibility that the answer simply arrived in a form you did not expect. Over time, many people look back at their lives and realize that the most important prayers they ever prayed were answered through events that initially seemed disappointing. A relationship that ended made room for a healthier connection later. A career opportunity that disappeared prevented years of frustration in the wrong environment. A delay that once felt painful provided the time needed to grow into the person capable of handling the blessing that eventually arrived. These realizations reveal a powerful spiritual truth. God rarely answers prayers exactly the way people imagine. Human expectations focus on immediate relief and visible solutions. Divine wisdom focuses on transformation, alignment, and long-term purpose. What feels like disruption in the present may actually be the beginning of a better path forming quietly beneath the surface. And once you begin recognizing this pattern, you start approaching life's unexpected changes differently. Instead of immediately assuming something went wrong, you begin asking whether the shift might actually be the first sign that your prayer is being answered in a way that only time will fully reveal. One of the most confusing ways God answers a prayer is through a door that suddenly closes. This moment often arrives without warning. You may have spent months, sometimes even years, working toward a particular opportunity. You invested your time, your focus, your energy, and your hope into a direction that seemed promising. In your mind, it made sense. The path looked right, the timing seemed reasonable, and you believed that the effort you put in would eventually lead to the breakthrough you were praying for. When you prayed, you asked God to bless that path. You asked Him to open the right doors, to guide your steps, and to allow the opportunity to unfold. But instead of the door opening wider, something unexpected happens. The opportunity disappears. The job you hoped for goes to someone else. The project you worked toward falls apart. A relationship you believed was part of your future suddenly ends. The path that once looked clear now feels blocked. In that moment, disappointment becomes the first emotion many people feel. The mind immediately begins asking questions. Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Was my prayer ignored? Did God say no? These questions are natural, because people often interpret closed doors as rejection or failure. But in many cases, the closed door is not rejection at all. It is protection. One of the difficult realities of life is that not every opportunity that looks good in the moment will lead to a good outcome in the future. Human beings often make decisions based on limited information. They see what is immediately visible, but cannot see the full path that lies ahead. God, however, sees every part of that path. He sees the environments that will strengthen you and the ones that will slowly drain your purpose. He sees which relationships will support your growth and which ones will quietly pull you away from who you are meant to become. Because of this broader perspective, sometimes the most loving answer to prayer is the removal of an opportunity that seemed perfect on the surface. What feels like loss may actually be redirection away from something that would have created deeper problems later. Imagine walking down a road that looks peaceful from where you stand, but far ahead there is a bridge that has already collapsed. You cannot see the broken bridge yet because it lies miles ahead, but God can see the entire road. Closing the path now may feel frustrating because you cannot see the danger, but it prevents a disaster that would occur if you continued forward. In the same way, certain doors close, not because you are unworthy of the opportunity, but because the opportunity itself was not aligned with the future God intends for you. At the time, this truth can be difficult to accept because emotions focus on what was lost. When something you hoped for disappears, it can feel like the effort you invested was wasted. But spiritual growth often involves learning that not every closed door represents failure. Sometimes, it represents guidance. It is God gently shifting your direction before you travel too far down a road that was never meant to define your life. Many people only understand this years later, when they look back at moments that once felt painful. They realize that the job they did not get would have placed them in an unhealthy environment. They see that the relationship that ended was preventing them from growing into a stronger version of themselves. They recognize that the opportunity that disappeared would have limited the possibilities that later opened in unexpected ways. What once looked like a setback becomes a turning point that quietly shaped the rest of their story. This perspective changes how closed doors are understood. Instead of viewing them only as disappointment, they begin to be seen as part of divine direction. A door closing may be the moment when God redirects your energy towards something more aligned with your purpose. But this process requires trust, because the new path is not always visible right away. When one door closes, there may be a period of uncertainty where the next opportunity has not yet appeared. During that time, faith becomes the foundation that keeps a person moving forward. It allows them to believe that the shift has meaning, even when the explanation is not yet clear. In reality, many of the most meaningful chapters of a person's life begin immediately after a door closes. The ending of one opportunity creates space for something new to enter. A different environment appears, a new relationship forms. A path that was never previously considered suddenly becomes possible. None of this would have happened if the original door had remained open. When you understand this pattern, the meaning of disappointment begins to change. Instead of assuming that your prayer was denied, you begin asking whether the closed door might actually be the answer. It may be God protecting your future in ways you cannot yet see. It may be the moment where your life quietly shifts toward a path that will eventually make far more sense than the one you originally planned. And although that realization may take time to fully understand, many people eventually discover that the door they once begged God to open was the very door that needed to close, so the right one could appear later. After the door you hoped for closes, another experience often follows that many people struggle to understand. Instead of a new opportunity appearing quickly, life may enter a quiet period where nothing seems to move forward. Progress feels slow, answers feel distant, and the future appears uncertain. This stage is commonly described as a season of waiting. For many people, this can be one of the most challenging parts of the spiritual journey, because waiting rarely feels productive from a human perspective. When you have prayed for direction or breakthrough, you expect movement. You expect signs that things are improving or shifting toward the outcome you hoped for. But during a season of waiting, those signs may not appear immediately. Days pass, weeks pass, sometimes even months pass, and the path ahead still looks unclear. In those moments, it can begin to feel as though God has become silent. The mind starts questioning whether the prayer was truly heard. Doubt slowly tries to enter the heart, because human nature tends to interpret silence as absence. But spiritual growth reveals something different. Waiting is not always silence. Sometimes, waiting is preparation. One of the realities of life is that blessings often come with responsibility. The opportunities people pray for can bring influence, pressure, leadership, or challenges that require a certain level of maturity and strength. If those blessings arrive before a person is ready to carry them, the outcome may not be as positive as expected. For this reason, God sometimes focuses on preparing the person before releasing the promise they asked for. This preparation often happens quietly, in ways that are not immediately visible. During a waiting season, patience begins to develop. The ability to trust without immediate results slowly grows stronger. Faith becomes less dependent on visible outcomes and more rooted in the belief that God is still guiding the path, even when progress cannot yet be measured. This internal transformation is important because it changes how a person approaches both success and difficulty in the future. Instead of relying only on external circumstances for confidence, they develop a deeper stability within themselves. Waiting also creates space for clarity. When life moves quickly, people often rush from one decision to the next without deeply reflecting on whether the direction truly aligns with their purpose. But when progress slows down, there is time to think, observe, and evaluate the path more carefully. This reflection can reveal insights that were previously hidden beneath the noise of constant activity. A person may begin recognizing patterns in their life that they did not notice before. They may realize that certain goals they once pursued were influenced more by pressure from others than by their true calling. They may discover talents or passions that had been overlooked while chasing other opportunities. In this way, the waiting season becomes a period of discovery rather than emptiness. Another important transformation that occurs during waiting is emotional growth. When everything moves quickly and results appear easily, it is possible to develop a fragile sense of confidence that depends entirely on success. But when a person learns how to remain steady during uncertainty, their emotional strength becomes much deeper. They develop resilience. They learn how to remain focused, even when the outcome is not immediately visible. This kind of strength becomes incredibly valuable later when greater responsibilities or challenges appear. People who have learned patience are often better prepared to handle success wisely because they understand how long meaningful growth can take. Perhaps the most important lesson waiting teaches is trust in God's timing. Human beings naturally want answers quickly. They measure progress through immediate results and visible changes. But divine timing operates differently. God sees the full path of a person's life, including moments that have not yet happened. He knows when the right environment will appear, when the right people will enter your life, and when the opportunity you prayed for will truly benefit you rather than overwhelm you. From this perspective, the timing of a blessing matters just as much as the blessing itself. Receiving something too early can create challenges that might not exist if it arrived at the proper moment. Waiting ensures that the foundation beneath the opportunity is strong enough to support it. Many people only realize the value of this season after it ends. When the opportunity finally appears, they recognize that they are not the same person they were when they first prayed. Their thinking is clearer, their confidence is deeper, their faith is stronger. The waiting period shaped them into someone capable of handling what they once asked for. Without that preparation, the blessing might have arrived before they were ready to manage it. This realization reveals an important spiritual truth. God does not simply deliver answers to prayer as quickly as possible. Instead, He carefully shapes the person who prayed so that the answer will become a source of growth rather than pressure. The waiting season becomes the quiet workshop where character, patience, and wisdom are formed. Although it may feel slow while you are living through it, that time is rarely wasted. It is building something inside you that will eventually support the future you prayed for. When viewed from this perspective, waiting no longer appears as an empty space between prayers and answers. It becomes a meaningful chapter in the story of how God prepares a person for the life they are meant to live. And once that preparation reaches the right moment, the next change often begins to unfold in ways that feel both surprising and perfectly timed. After a season of waiting, something subtle often begins to shift. The stillness that once surrounded your life slowly gives way to movement. But the movement does not always look the way you imagined. Instead of a single, clear breakthrough, you begin noticing small changes appearing around you. New people enter your life in unexpected ways. Certain relationships that once felt permanent start fading quietly into the background. Opportunities that never existed before suddenly appear, while others that seemed stable begin to transform. At first, these changes can feel confusing because they disrupt the familiar structure you once relied on. Human beings naturally seek stability in their environment. They build routines, relationships, and plans that help life feel predictable. When those structures begin shifting, it can create a sense of uncertainty. You may find yourself wondering why certain connections no longer feel the same, or why opportunities you once pursued no longer hold the same meaning. What once felt like a clear path begins rearranging itself piece by piece. But in many cases, this is not chaos. It is alignment. When God begins answering a prayer in a deeper way, He often rearranges the environment surrounding the person who prayed. This process may involve introducing people who will support the next stage of your life, while gradually removing influences that no longer fit the direction ahead. It may involve shifting circumstances so that your attention moves toward opportunities you had never previously considered. At the time, these adjustments can feel uncomfortable because they interrupt the rhythm you once knew. But every change carries a purpose that becomes clearer with time. Imagine a builder preparing the foundation for a new structure. Before the new building can stand, the old materials must be moved, the ground must be cleared, and the foundation must be reshaped. From the outside, this process can look messy. Dust rises into the air. Pieces of the previous structure are removed, and the space temporarily appears disorganized. Yet every movement is intentional. Each adjustment creates the conditions necessary for the new structure to stand securely. In a similar way, God often prepares your environment before revealing the full answer to your prayer. Certain relationships may fade, not because they were meaningless, but because their role in your life has reached completion. People who once walked beside you may have been part of a previous chapter that helped shape who you became. But as your purpose evolves, the path may require different influences and different support. At the same time, new connections may appear in ways that feel almost accidental. A conversation with a stranger leads to an unexpected opportunity. A new colleague introduces you to ideas that change how you think. A friendship forms that encourages you to step into possibilities you once doubted. These moments may seem small individually, but together they begin creating a network of change that gradually redirects your life. Opportunities also begin shifting during this stage. You might notice doors opening in areas you never previously explored. At the same time, certain paths that once seemed promising may lose their momentum. This is not coincidence. It is often the process of realignment. God sees the direction your life is meant to take and begins guiding your attention toward the places where that purpose can grow. But because this process unfolds gradually, it can feel confusing while you are living through it. Many people initially interpret these shifts as instability. They worry that something in their life is falling apart. They may try to hold on to the familiar relationships or routines that once made them feel secure. Yet, resisting these changes can sometimes delay the growth that is trying to occur. When God begins rearranging the environment around you, it is usually because the next chapter requires a different structure than the one you previously had. What appears to be loss may actually be the clearing of space for something more aligned with who you are becoming. An important truth about these seasons is that the full picture rarely appears all at once. Instead, the pieces move gradually until the pattern begins forming. One small change leads to another. One new opportunity leads to a different direction. One conversation introduces a perspective that reshapes how you see your future. Slowly, the path begins forming in ways that were impossible to predict earlier. Looking back, many people realize that the breakthrough they prayed for did not arrive as a single dramatic moment. Instead, it unfolded through a series of adjustments that quietly repositioned their life. What once felt like scattered events eventually revealed themselves as a carefully arranged sequence leading towards something meaningful. This realization changes how you view unexpected changes. Instead of seeing them as disruptions, you begin recognizing them as signals that something new is forming. The relationships shifting around you, the opportunities appearing from unfamiliar places, and the gradual movement of your circumstances may all be part of the same process. Before the visible breakthrough appears, the environment often changes first. God moves pieces behind the scenes so that when the opportunity finally arrives, the structure around you is ready to support it. What once felt confusing begins to make sense as the path ahead becomes clearer. And as these changes continue unfolding, you may start noticing that the most significant transformation is not only happening around you, but also within you. As the external changes begin settling into place, another transformation often becomes noticeable, but this one happens internally. Long before the final answer to a prayer fully appears in the outer world, something begins shifting within the person who prayed. The way you think starts evolving. The priorities that once guided your decisions begin changing. Situations that used to feel extremely important no longer carry the same weight, while deeper values start becoming clearer. This internal shift is often the first true sign that God is answering a prayer in a meaningful way. Instead of immediately transforming your circumstances, God begins by transforming you. At first, this change can be subtle. You may notice that your perspective toward challenges becomes calmer than before. Situations that once created anxiety or frustration no longer control your emotions in the same way. Your focus begins moving away from temporary outcomes and toward long-term meaning.
You start caring less about proving yourself to others and more about understanding the purpose behind the path you are walking. These shifts do not happen overnight, but over time, they become impossible to ignore. The person you are becoming slowly feels stronger, more stable, and more aware of what truly matters. This transformation is powerful because it prepares you to recognize opportunities that you may have overlooked in the past. When your mindset changes, the way you interpret events changes as well. Situations that once appeared as obstacles begin revealing hidden possibilities. Challenges that once felt overwhelming become experiences that teach resilience and wisdom. Even your relationship with faith begins deepening. Instead of seeing prayer only as a request for solutions, you begin understanding it as a conversation with God that shapes who you are becoming. This inner maturity becomes one of the most valuable answers to prayer because it equips you with the clarity needed for the future ahead. Emotional growth often follows this shift in mindset. You develop patience that did not exist before. You become less reactive to temporary setbacks and more confident in your ability to navigate uncertainty. When problems arise, you no longer assume that everything is falling apart. Instead, you pause and look for the lesson or direction hidden inside the moment. This emotional strength creates a foundation that allows you to handle greater responsibility without losing balance. Many people spend years asking God to change their circumstances while never realizing that the most important change begins inside their own heart and mind. When that internal transformation takes place, the person who once prayed for guidance is no longer the same individual who started the journey. They are wiser, more patient, and more prepared for what comes next. Once this inner alignment develops, something else often begins appearing in ways that feel almost surprising. Opportunities start emerging from directions you never expected. The answer to your prayer does not arrive in the exact form you imagined earlier. Instead, it appears through a different path that you had not previously considered. Perhaps you prayed for success in a specific career, but eventually discovered a completely different field where your abilities thrive even more. Perhaps you prayed for a relationship to work, only to later meet someone who brings a deeper sense of partnership and understanding than you had imagined. Perhaps you prayed for financial stability through one opportunity, only to find that a different path provided not only stability, but also purpose and fulfillment. These unexpected blessings often carry a sense of quiet realization. You begin recognizing that the prayer you once spoke was indeed answered, just not in the exact form you originally expected. What seemed like delays, closed doors, and confusing changes were actually guiding you towards something more aligned with who you were becoming. When the blessing finally appears, it feels natural rather than forced. The path that once looked uncertain now appears connected through a series of experiences that gradually prepared you for this moment. Looking back, you may realize that if your original plan had succeeded exactly the way you wanted, you might never have discovered the opportunity that now feels so right. This realization reveals one of the most profound truths about faith and prayer. God rarely answers prayers by simply delivering what we imagine in the moment. Instead, He often replaces our limited expectations with something that carries deeper purpose and greater alignment with our life's direction. What begins as a request for one specific outcome may eventually lead to a completely different blessing that fulfills the deeper intention behind the prayer. Over time, this understanding strengthens trust. You begin recognizing that even the moments that felt confusing or disappointing were part of a larger process guiding your life forward. The closed doors protected you. The waiting season prepared you. The unexpected changes realigned your environment, and the inner transformation reshaped your perspective. By the time the blessing finally appeared, you were no longer the same person who first asked for it. You had grown into someone capable of recognizing its value and using it wisely. When people reflect on these journeys years later, many realize that God did answer their prayers all along. The answer simply arrived through a path far more thoughtful and carefully designed than the one they originally imagined. And once you understand this pattern, you begin approaching future challenges differently, trusting that even when the path looks uncertain, something meaningful may already be unfolding beyond what you can currently see. Sometimes the moment when God answers a prayer does not feel like victory at first. It may feel like a door closing, a season of waiting, or unexpected changes unfolding around you. In those moments, it is easy to believe that nothing is happening, or that the prayer was never heard. But many of the most meaningful answers arrive through redirection, preparation, and quiet transformation. What seems confusing today may later reveal itself as the exact path that led you towards something greater than you imagined. God sees the entire journey, while we only see the moment in front of us. Trust the process, trust the timing, and trust that every shift may be guiding you closer to where you are meant to be.